But I was staggered by the gulf between different parts of this country, where if you fly between Michigan and Manhattan, or St. Louis and San Francisco, you felt like you were crossing decades or dimensions or ways of life and not just a few time zones. But I was still surprised when Donald Trump became our president in 2016. But I'm a numbers guy, New Hampshire, and I went looking for an explanation in the numbers. And I found one. We blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years. And where were those jobs? Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa, all of the swing states that Trump needed to win and did win. It happened right here in New Hampshire a little bit earlier. You all lost over 12,000 manufacturing jobs, primarily in the northern part of the state. I have been to those towns and they have never recovered. After the plant or factory closed, the shopping districts closed thereafter, people started leaving, the school shrank. How many of you have noticed stores closing where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing? Amazon, $20 billion in business getting sucked up by Amazon every single year. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. That is your math, New Hampshire. 20 billion out, zero back. 30% of your stores and malls closed for good. And one of the reasons why I love being back in New Hampshire so much is that this is one of the only places in the country that democracy actually functions the way it is intended. Most of our fellow Americans look up and they see the government pipes clogged with millions and millions of dollars of lobbyist cash, and they think there is nothing they can do about it. They are generally correct. There is nothing they can do about it. But you can. That is the magic of this place. You have the future of the country in your hands. I did the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? 1,000 Californians each. You're just going through your days, living your lives. You don't walk around thinking that you're some sort of superhero or super voter that has the power of the future in your hands, but you are, and you do. Now, if you're here tonight, at some point in the not-so-distant past, you heard there's a guy running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. And I know the first time you heard it, you were like, ha, that's a gimmick, that's too good to be true, that will never happen. But this is not my idea, and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of the country. He called it the citizens' dividend. Martin Luther King fought for it in the 60s. I sat with Martin Luther King's son, and he said this is what his dad was fighting for when he was killed in 1968, the guaranteed minimum income for all Americans. 1,000 economists endorsed it in the 60s, and in the early 80s, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. We need to start measuring our progress by how you are doing. Instead of these phantom GDP and stock market and unemployment numbers, which are bunk, and I can spend some time explaining how they're all garbage, we should instead be measuring our progress by your health and life expectancy, your mental health and freedom from substance abuse, whether you can retire with dignity, how our kids are doing, clean air and clean water. As your president, I will actually shift GDP to these measurements. And if you think that's impossible, we made up GDP 100 years ago. And even the inventor of GDP said this. He said this is a terrible measurement of national well-being, and we should never use it as that. And here we are 100 years later, following it off a cliff. So this is the message, this is the vision that you have to take to the rest of the country early next, I can't believe early next year, I'm going to say early next year. This is like 5 hours from now or whatever.
2020!
That we can distinguish between economic value and human value. That we can actually value ourselves in a way that's independent of what the market is saying. Because the market does not care about us. The market does not care about my son. The market doesn't care about elderly Americans. It's going to be up to us. We have to take back control of this government that has been lost to us for far too long. Washington, D.C. is right now the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce?
Lies.
New Hampshire, you know we have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society as quickly as possible. We have to evolve in the way we think about ourselves and our work and our value. And our children. And I am the ideal candidate for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much, Concord. You may not know this, but math is an acronym, and what does it stand for? Make America think harder. That's right. That is your job, New Hampshire. You're going to move this country, not left, not right, but